are none. Thank you.
In your packet, you have for conceptual approval, so just a reminder, this is so that they can host an evening for families and students to hear about the opportunity. So a conceptual approval for a trip to Quebec in April of 2023, open to students in grades 8 through 12, as Savi's just explained. Keeping students interested in the language is helpful, and some of these trips are good PR for some of the languages. Our French numbers do drop off a little bit as students make their way through the middle school into the high school. So I think she's really hoping to engage folks in the culture. It is a very short trip, but it's just 3 days. The itinerary is also in the handout. So conceptual approval just allows them to hold the information night to see how many families and students are interested before they would go. It would come back to you for your eyes based off the chaperones numbers, all of that. So.
I did have one quick question.
Yep.
Do you need a passport to go to Canada?
Yes, you need a passport.
So a lot of these kids, getting a passport right now is a process.
It's not too bad. I just renewed my own kids' passports. It took about 5 weeks for the passport.
Oh.
So.
It took about 3 weeks. We did ours this year too.
Oh, but that's
I think they're caught up, because I did.
Yeah.
Our boys ran out over the pandemic, and I was like, it's going to take us forever to get passports, and it was much faster than we had.
Oh, no, that's good. I've been hearing horror stories of 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and I'm saying, oh heavens, this great idea, but April is kind of close.
Yeah, so I think Civi's is hoping to have the informational night relatively soon, and then we'll have an idea from that, even whether it's viable or not. I know sometimes you all don't look at all of the details since it's just conceptual approval. It is a large number. The cost is high for the trip, so I don't know if that'll be a deterrent to families or not, but it's just helpful for us to be able to bring the group together and talk through the opportunity.
Do they have to get a minimum of 15?
Yes, they need 15.
And they're doing the fundraising to try to offset it.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Do we have a motion for conceptual approval of the world language trip to Quebec for April of 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
The adjustment to the agenda is we are not asking you to take a vote on the surplus copy machine at the high school because we have a Plan B right now, but it's possible it might come back to you as surplus at the next meeting, but we are working through an option of getting it fixed, so.
See what's open for the home office.
It's broken right now.
I'm just joking. I really don't want a printer. I don't want any calls. I don't need a printer.
You're gonna get a lot of calls. So the next item is policy subcommittee. So when we met last, we talked about getting the subcommittees together more regularly. Policy was the first one to organize. And we meet the third Wednesday of the month. And we did meet in September, and we took a look at some of the items that we had talked about recently here at this table, and then some of the items that came through the MASC policy updates that come, I think, quarterly. I think you all should be subscribed to that listserv for the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Yeah, if you're not, I think Natalie can help with that. If you're not getting it, just shoot her an email, and she will see what we need to do to get you on that. So when we met last time, we talked about the library resources, digital resources, access to those resources. So that was the main conversation that we had when Policy Sub met in September. We talked about what other districts are doing about access to digital resources, what our own existing policies kind of manage as far as access to digital resources. We did find a draft policy, so the reason why it's in red means it's an entirely new policy for us, which is policy IJND, which is access to digital resources, and it really just re-emphasizes our acceptable use policy, as well as the COPA and SIPA guidance from the government on protecting children on the internet. We talked a lot at Policy Sub about the downloading of ebooks, the digital resources associated with folks. I did have Christine Murphy, our high school librarian, just kind of pull for me what was downloaded over the course of last year, because I think when we spoke last time, I didn't even have a number, no idea. So there was 231 titles downloaded from the span of September 1st of 2021 through August 31st of 2022. the bulk of that downloading happens as students are trying to access the summer reading list. So I would say more than 70% of it was from the middle of June through the end of August, kids doing their summer reading. So I think it was helpful to get that information. I think we talked a little bit about what would it look like if we just shut off the access to kids. Again, that we'd be the only high school in Massachusetts to do that. So what we talked about at Policy Sub was really how does that align with our current acceptable use policy, and how do we enforce it? There's so few downloads happening each month that we could easily track the student account associated with those downloads. So we talked a little bit about having the high school librarian monthly take a look at the downloads and make sure that they're high school students that are downloading, because if it's an elementary student, it would be a violation of our acceptable use policy because they don't have access to the Massachusetts library system. And then for families, what action could families take? And so as a family, you are asked to sign the acceptable use policy. You can absolutely sign that you don't want your student to have access to digital resources. And then that's something we manage internally with a paper process. So I think that's kind of where we landed. We didn't find any language in any other policies in any other district that had parameters on how to use digital resources, more along the lines of referring folks back to the acceptable use agreements. There's a couple districts that call it digital empowerment usage. They had a couple of different names, but it was really coming back to reinforcing that you've signed an acceptable use policy and the repercussions associated with that are spelled out in the student handbooks.
So, just to clarify, the 231 titles that were downloaded were all high school students. We, on average, have somewhere between 750 and 800 students in the high school in Pembroke.
Depends.
Yeah, kind of in that
early
range.
70s.
I'm just trying to put it in perspective, so yeah, that's a fairly low number given the
Right,
amount of
so
reading.
remember, the devices that students have are Chromebooks. They're not
Mhm.
meant to download large
items.
items onto, so we're not giving them desktop computers to do that. I think she did break out the list. Only half were downloaded on our devices. The rest are students using their school email to download onto another device, whether their phone or a tablet at home to read. So,
Which we can't regulate anyway, because that's their device, right?
well, if we shut off access to the Massachusetts library system, students would
Right,
have
which
to
we don't wanna
get a
do.
library card on their own in order to do that, so.
Gotcha.
So let me ask a question. So there was like 30% that weren't some reading, they were just general books.
Yep.
The first question, like nothing inappropriate that you found, they were all like normal titles?
No, the
or-
only person downloading inappropriate books was Mary Beth and myself, trying to see how many clicks it took to get to the books. It was really eye-opening.
Got it?
Don't make me laugh into the microphone.
We did it a few times as test students, so that address kept coming up, and I'm like, who has a test student? I'm like, oh my God, that was us in the conference room.
I think we might have even thrown one
Yeah.
of Jen's kids in.
Yeah, we used
One of
I
the
think we used
Simmons.
Connor Simmons because we knew he was an elementary student to see if we could, how far we could get with that student password and ID. So the bulk of the books that are downloaded over the course of the school year, I would say are 50% research, 50% fiction, easy read, Ready Player One kind of. There was nothing surprising in there.
Is there a way to provide parents with a list of downloaded books per quarter or something, so that way any concerned parent can look and say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it because, like, these are all normal? 'Cause
So
I think that
items checked out of our library are pretty heavily regulated
I'm
as far
talking
as
about
what
the
we can
digital.
share and not share.
Yeah.
Whether it's digitally checked out or physically checked out. I'm not sure how, like what avenue we would share that. I mean, I guess we
You mean for
could.
their own child, or are you talking?
No,
in
just
general?
generally speaking, like, I feel like if we can have some sort of accountability to the public, just say, look, it's just a show, like, we're not downloading.
We can do that. We can quarterly
Sorry.
put up on the library tab the titles that were downloaded. I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
there's-
I mean, I wonder if we could
imagine.
do that, like, quarterly, and then that would give parents, like, sort of an ease of mind.
I'm not gonna be testing anything else in that quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
And then, so I just think, like, if that, just to empower parents.
I mean, I'm
like,
not
if-
gonna send out like a broadcast email that says, here's the
No,
titles. We'll
like,
just post it
somewhere
on the library site.
website.
Okay.
Yeah, the library site,
Yep.
if any parent is wondering, like, what titles were downloaded to, because I think the issue is, like, I'll just use my own daughter as an example, like, I can look at her phone and computer anytime I want, her personal phone and computer. I can see what she's looking at. I have certain websites shut off. I monitor what her texts and, social media or whatever. With the school issued laptops, parents don't have as much control, and we have to trust the school to have.
Right,
that
well, you
control.
can absolutely sign on as your student. So when we did virtual conferences and virtual open houses, we had all parents sign in with their student's name and password. That's how you access the open house Google Meet links. I sign on as my kids all the time to check their homework, but that information is available. If you're interested in getting
Right.
your daughter's password, we can share that with you. I mean,
Okay, so maybe like maybe we just have to let parents know somehow, like this,
Yep.
you know, if you ever want to look at your child's laptop.
right,
it's just like,
they're unable, on the Chromebooks, they're really unable to download anything. It's really just
which is great.
software that we push
And-
out.
And
but-
really, that's the main thing, because we don't want, like, I feel like that's a district liability.
Yeah.
Like, anybody can download a book from the Massachusetts.
Well, and I think based on our conversations before, right, that was really, in policy, that was our dialogue.
Right, yeah.
From a school standpoint, using the school lens, are we protected? Are we doing the things we need to protect the students and the
Right.
and the faculty in the district on these downloads? And
Yeah.
we feel like these policies that we have in place, plus kind of reiterating some of the other standards that we talked about,
Yeah.
do that for us, right? Because like you said, we live in a digital world. Kids have access to devices. They're going to have access to things outside of here.
Right.
More so.
There's nothing we can
want
do
to make
about it.
sure we've done our due diligence to making sure that the district has done the best they can in that front.
Exactly.
So that's sort of what
We
came
can't
up
be the
with.
parents to the parents at home. They have to be
Right.
the
'Cause
parents
like
there.
you said, some parents are like yourself, and they're well into what their students are up to, and others don't. And so that's
Yeah.
what they do in their household, but from a district standpoint, we want to be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like as a parent, I think there might be a place in Power School that shows you any book that your child checked out of the library. I think we track all of the time. I'll email you separately.
So, all right, that would be awesome. And then
They track it somehow, because we talk about overdue fees, so, and old materials. I'll look into it. I'll look at it.
And the only other thing, like, I know I already asked you this, like, we don't have enough library books for people to be, like, for it to be even an issue, but like, you know, we don't ever have anybody challenging a book in one of our libraries.
We haven't had anybody challenge a book. We did have a conversation with a high school parent last year about a book that is a sequel to another book, just around how the book was sourced for the library. Both Dr. Galligan and our Christine Murphy, our librarian, worked through the steps, you know, the list that they use and whatnot. The book itself is a movie. It's a PG-13 movie. So, yes, there are sections of the book that are questionable as far as language, but again, it's a PG-13. So good for audiences 13 and above, which is anybody in our high school.
Right, and so then the parent was comfortable once you explained
Yes,
it in those terms?
she didn't ask to go through the process to have the book removed. So.
Okay, all right. So, like, in that process, one of it says that the book stays on the shelf until it's reviewed. Is it possible, like, just in the interest, again, of, like, transparency to the public and for the public to feel comfortable that we are not doing anything nefarious in our schools with our books, is there a process where we could just have it taken off the shelf immediately until it's reviewed and then do quick review process? Like, I mean, is it possible, instead of like leaving it on the shelf for potentially other students, rather than do that, like if I'd rather see it
So
taken
there's
off.
not a book in the library that doesn't meet the criteria that are spelled out in the document that you have, so in.
And I'm sure you're right.
4.22 IGLA, so
And-
pulling it off the shelf would mean that we purchased something that was against the ideal ahead of time.
Not
I don't-
necessarily. It would just mean it's up for review just to make sure it wasn't.
Review because a parent asked us to, not, the certified school librarian has already put through to purchase that and put it on the shelf, so.
Right, but I'm just thinking that, everybody makes mistakes, and what if, and honestly, we're not buying library books anyway, so
We
it's a
don't buy many
non-issue.
books,
But I just want to be extra cautious. This is like an extra cautious step. Like, I don't see the harm in pulling it off the shelf if some parent, like, it's gonna go right back on the shelf because it's probably not gonna be inappropriate because, like you said, a certified librarian.
Right, usually what happens when a parent is challenging the book is that their child has checked out the book and it's not available to be checked out anyways.
That's true,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's my only thought, is just to keep, that way parents feel empowered, that, we're not trying to slip some crazy book.
I'm kind of thinking this.
Right,
one
I'd
through,
also
though.
like the school librarian to feel empowered to make the selections that she believes
I agree.
are in line with the ideals of.
I agree, there's gotta be a balance.
But being devil's advocate, because I'm sitting here and all I keep hearing in my head is innocent until proven guilty. And we do that with people. So I'm
Well,
kind
I
of
don't
like.
think this is an indictment against the librarian.
No,
I
no,
just
I'm
think
talking
it's like-
about with the book, because I'm just being a devil's advocate, because I'm not sure, I get what you're saying, and it's extra protection for families, but at the same time, I'm trying to look at the flip side of the argument of if we've done the protocols, and, there's the trust in the employee that's done it, are we overstepping on, I don't know.
But we're
it-
not looking at the books. We're not
Right, we're not
micromanaging
looking
it.
at it.
We're not looking at anything. It's just a stopgap in the event that a parent comes across something that, maybe it's in the elementary library and it seemed like it was an elementary aged book and the reviews came back as such,
And then we see-
and then
yeah.
suddenly a parent reads it and it's like something that's completely inappropriate and for that age level or something, and the parent wants to flag it. I think,
Err on the side of caution.
it
is
never
kind of-
happens.
Right.
Right, it's error on the it never happens. Like we said, we had it happen once where one parent questioned a book and she never even went through the process. So, so it's not really a take up any time. It's just a little stopgap to make parents feel safe. I don't know.
Looks like it's a 2-week window that we have to review.
Yep,
Yeah, so I mean, so 2 weeks it might come off the shelf and then,
no problem.
I just help play devil's advocate with Susie and basically say, you could get a parent that doesn't like the Wizard of Oz, for example, and say, take it off. And we
right,
know-
but it comes for us.
But I'm saying-
But the good news
But-
is they can just download on the Master.
Right, but,
Exactly.
but you're asking us to pull the book until it can be reviewed. All we need is one overzealous parent to say, I don't like the Wizard of Oz, take the book down. I don't like this book,
But
take
is it
it
going to hurt our
down.
district to have it off the shelf for 2 weeks?
Well, again, to me, it's setting that bad precedent that, I think honestly, yes. I mean, a book like, I'm just using the Wizard of Oz because it has witches and all sorts of stuff, and maybe someone has a problem with that.
A crazy religious thing or whatever.
So I think we're giving, and I know it's not weird, we're giving a parent too much power and control. I think it's something we look at, and if we think we have to pull it off. But my thought is we have one overzealous parent, and we haven't yet, but who sits there and says, I don't like this book, that, we're gonna be pulling everything off the shelf to make one parent happy.
Well, we
and-
just said that never happens, like no parents ever asked. to
Right,
pull
but I'm
anything
saying,
off
why
the
put a
shelf.
policy in for something that never happens?
Because because in this day and age, and it doesn't happen in Pembroke, and it's
Yeah.
not, I'm not hearing about it happening in any of the districts nearby.
Yeah.
But in this day and age, people are really worried about, some of the new material that's being published, for elementary aged kids. And so, like, I want our public to know, like, I want them to feel very comfortable sending their kids to our school, knowing that we would never put something like that in the library. And if in fact it's somehow snuck through some channel, even though we don't think that our librarians would ever do that, that there's a process where we could get it off the shelf right away. But, if you're wrong, by the way, it's going back on the shelf in 2 weeks. It's only a 2-week review period. It's not like it's, if we were keeping it off for the year, that might be a different story, but like it's a 2-week period.
Yeah, and
It's gonna,
it allows the parent to know that they were heard.
Yeah,
Or any
exactly.
other individual that's questioned, because that's the last thing we want to do is ever shut down any question.
right, exactly.
So I kind of see where you're coming from, and I appreciate that you were being the devil advocate with me too. If there's anything that people can take away from the meetings, we really tried to think about both sides of this, and that's good. That's
Okay.
good. So, thanks for indulging me on that. I kind of took
Well,
you on
thanks for.
took you in a rabbit hole.
Listening
We
to me.
popped out the other side, I think.
None of it has anything to do with policy IJND, just so you know, that's a separate.
No, but you know what,
You
and-
guys are talking about IJR.
We
Nope.
found our own rabbit hole there.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry, one
Well,
more
it was
quick.
attached
oh,
to my,
yeah.
it's in here, so.
No, I know, because I'm asking to recode that.
Oh, okay, all
That's
right. Sorry.
No worries.
I hate to be the party police here, but there's actually a misspelling
Oh,
in the
good.
policy.
That's awesome.
Right above it where it says employee use, it says student woe or student woo. I'm
Who is
I'm
that?
assuming it might be,
We have a student.
yeah, I'm assuming it should be student who,
Yep,
but
got it.
I don't
It's a
want to
first read,
prove.
so I will correct it before it comes back
Thank
to you
you.
as a
No,
second
I
read.
just hate to be that guy that points that stuff out. Sue Scroggins was good at finding those little misspellings and commas.
David,
and-
just so you know, Sue Scroggins emails us ahead of time so we can fix it before tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, geez.
You want to take a page out of her book? Right, Natalie? So I'm just looking for you all to take IJND as a first read.
Do we have a motion to accept IJND as a first read?
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh,
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on I, J, and D? Seeing none, all those in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
So, as we worked through some of the stuff at policy and the conversation that we had a few weeks ago about the library resources, it came to light that the library policies are still the numbered policies and not the lettered policies. So I'm asking, so it's just approval to recode policy 422, which is library resources, to the right naming, which is IJLA, and then policy 4.23, which is IJR, as amended, because that's where the review of the books comes in. So I'll have it so that it comes off the shelf, just approval to recode as amended for those two policies.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are we doing both policies at once?
Yep.
Okay.
So then the next set of policies is a revision based off of the MASC policy newsletter. So in your packets, you have policy JICA, student dress code, policy JFBB, school choice, and policy GBA, equal employment opportunity. And so what the revision that we're asking for, the definition of race has been expanded to include traits historically associated with race, including but not limited to hair texture, hair type, hair length, and protective hairstyles. So that's part of the Acts of 2022, Chapter 117. So those three policies have the word race in them. We're just asking to expand the definition of race to include that piece of the act.
Does everybody understand? So basically, it was our policy that included that word, therefore we needed to expand the definition. That's what that was. All right, do we have a motion to accept the three JICA, JFBB, and GBA policy as changed
So
or
moved.
amended?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
There are a couple of other policies in our manual that have the word race in them. They're larger policies that we're bringing to you anyways in the future for revision. So our bullying and intervention policy, Title IX, there's a couple of other places where you'll see this same footnote come in again as part of a larger set of revisions. So.
All right, thank you. So future meeting dates and topics. We know our next meeting for our discussion last meeting is going to be October 18th, prior to town meeting.
So it'll be a
So
6
it'll be
o'clock
a 6
start?
o'clock meeting
At the high school.
at the high school, so that we're in
That
there.
meeting won't be televised just because PAC TV will be.
Correct, as they'll be preparing for town meeting, so we encourage the public to join us in person that night, since we will not be able to be televised.
It's not a huge agenda. It'll be,
Yep, we'll be hitting.
there's some surplus material stuff coming,
Yep.
and then a second read of IJND potentially, so.
Prior to town meeting.
Prior to town meeting.
Just updating the calendar. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good.
All right.
18th, right?
That on the agenda. Any other topics that you feel need to be addressed? I know I will have the Aaron's evaluation at that meeting as well, so that we will share that information with you.
So I'm wondering if you want to wait until the meeting's televised?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, we'll save that for
11, so I guess.
November.
I just wanted to give you all one update on the buses. I'm sure that folks have reached out potentially to you. I've heard
Yes.
from folks as well. It is much better right now than it was 2 weeks ago. But there was an issue with first student and drivers. Obviously, before school starts, we meet with our transportation provider for student to go over the routes and the drivers for those routes. Every route had a driver the day before school started. There has been some issues with illness amongst drivers, and first student has been comboing routes, and buses that generally just do a run for Bryantville are now picking up a north run, so they're later buses. It is much better now, but we did have a pretty solid meeting with first student just on our expectations. They're a vendor for us. Those drivers don't work here. We contract with first student for a service, and that service needs to be provided. So we did go through all of that. They outlined, kind of their plan over a 2-week period to get us back to where we needed to be, and we are well on our way there, so.
Aaron, was some of that as a result of all the tree work and the
No,
utility
it has
work?
nothing
No?
to do with length of routes or traffic in town. It is truly a driver shortage, which is a national conversation that we've talked about before, but in particular in Pembroke, the lot for our buses was having a difficult time covering the routes due to some employee issues. But we are in a much better place than we were 2 weeks ago, thank goodness.
Good. Thanks to the families for
for
being
that update.
patient with that.
And First View is now available, so you can track your student's bus online as well.
I
so.
downloaded that, but it said it wasn't quite ready yet. So.
I think it's Monday, is the day that it goes live, so.
Sounds good. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Sounds like we have a second. All those in favor?
Yes,
Aye.
sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our guests.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.